Chapter 1. The New Teacher. My name is Jennifer Dale. My friends call me Jenny. I'm 16 years old and I live near Boston. My town is beautiful and very green. I live here with my parents and my dog Fred. I go to school at Jefferson High and I want to become a journalist. In my free time, I play volleyball and I listen to heavy metal music. I want to tell you my story. It was the first day of high school. I was excited. I already knew most of my classmates, but I didn't know my new teachers. I got up, ate my breakfast, and went to school. On the street, I met my friend Dana. Her house is near mine and we always walk to school together. I hope our new teachers are men. And I hope they're handsome, Dana said. Dana loves talking about boys. Yes, I need something new and interesting in my life, I answered. We arrived at school and went into our classroom. A young man was inside. Hello, boys and girls. I'm your new science teacher. My name is Mr. Adams. I hope to work well with you this year. Dana and I looked at Mr. Adams. He was tall and thin. He had blonde hair and brown eyes. He seemed friendly. We're lucky. I think he's a very handsome teacher, Dana said to me. Yes, he is, I answered. I looked at him and he looked at me. Our eyes met. What's your name? He asked, smiling. Jennifer, I answered. I was a little nervous. He turned to Dana. And who are you? I'm Dana. Dana gave him a big, enthusiastic smile. At that moment, the noise of an airplane attracted our attention. Everyone in the class looked out of the window, but the sun was in front of us. It bothered our ears. We turned away from the window, except Mr. Adams. He was at the window and was looking directly at the sun. The sun didn't irritate his eyes. Gee, I thought. How can he look at it like that? The airplane then passed and the lesson continued. When the hour finished, another man walked in. This one had black hair and green eyes. His nose was small and pointed, and he had strangely high cheekbones. What a weird-looking teacher! Wow, you're right! She exclaimed. The teacher didn't smile and spoke coldly to the class. I'm your English teacher. I want you to be on your best behavior this year. The lesson can begin. And remember, no talking. Everyone in class was evidently shocked, but no one said anything. Another student, Steve, raised his hand. What? Asked the new teacher in his cold voice. Excuse me, but what's your name? Mr. Stone? He answered. I then noticed that his voice wasn't just cold. It was metallic and monotonous. Dana looked at me with disappointment. She raised her eyebrows. What's his problem? She mouthed. The lesson proceeded. Mr. Stone read a poem from our English literature book. His voice was weird, very weird. It had no emotion. It was almost robotic. Someone touched me. It was Dana. Isn't he horrible? She whispered. I nodded. The other teachers we met that morning were Miss Smith, the arts teacher, and Mrs. Ching, who taught math. Both seemed nice. Miss Smith, in particular, was a very cheerful person. Chapter 2. Clues. I always eat lunch at school. That day I ate with Dana and Paul Miller, another friend from my class. Paul was a very intelligent boy. He was always the best in math. His parents were divorced and he lived with his father and his black cat, Apollo. He missed his mother. She lived with another man and didn't want to see Paul. His father was never at home, so Paul was very lonely. He didn't have many friends at school because he was too intellectual. He loved Apollo very much and spent a lot of time with him. "What do you think about our new teachers?" I asked my friends. "I think Mr. Adams is very sexy," said Dana. "Did you see how he looked at the airplane? The sun didn't bother him," exclaimed Paul. "You're right," I said. "But did you hear Mr. Stone? He speaks like a robot. His voice is cold and metallic." "He's unfriendly, too," added Dana. "That's true," I said. "Look," said Paul. "Look what he's eating." We looked at Mr. Stone. He sat away from the other teachers and he didn't have a normal lunch. There was a glass in front of him. It was full of a dense, green liquid. There were some black pills in his hand. He put 2 of them in the glass. The green liquid started to bubbly, and it changed color. It started to become red. Then he took the glass and drank the mysterious red formula. I looked at Paul and he looked at me. We were disgusted and frightened. Dana tried to be rational. "Maybe it's a new diet. Maybe that's why he's so thin," she said. I didn't agree. There was something strange about Mr. Stone. That afternoon and the next day we met our other new teachers. We also had English again. Mr. Stone came in and sat down. "Miller, Paul Miller, tell me something about yourself." Paul was surprised. English teachers don't usually ask personal questions. "Well, Paul, don't you have anything to say?" Well, I enjoy astronomy. I have a cat." Mr. Stone asked everyone to say something about their life and hobbies. Maybe he wants to create a relationship with us, but he's such a cold person. How bizarre, I thought. Then, looking at him more carefully, I noticed something. His eyes weren't green anymore. They seemed a darker, different color. I raised my hand. "May I go to the bathroom?" I asked. As I walked towards the door, I looked at Mr. Stone's eyes again. I was right. They were yellowish-brown. They looked like amber. Chapter 3. Aliens. That afternoon I sat on my bed and thought about my first 2 days of high school. I wanted to know more about Mr. Stone. I decided to go and visit Paul. Paul was in front of his computer. He was very interested in astronomy, the occult, and life on other planets. "Hi, Paul. What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm on the internet. I'm in contact with the International Space Fan Club. Listen to this. Something very important is happening. A comet is passing through the Virgo constellation. There are the right connections for intergalactic meetings. The Earth has been in the Virgo constellation since last week." "But what are intergalactic meetings?" I asked. "They're voyages of aliens to our planet. These voyages can happen only in special moments, for example, when a constellation and a comet meet. Aliens can travel to our planet for different reasons. Sometimes they want to study us humans. Some people say that aliens may come to Earth to conquer the planet. I looked at Paul with a shocked expression. An idea started to form in my mind. "What's wrong, Jenny?" Paul asked. "Maybe Mr. Stone is an alien," I exclaimed. "Gee, aren't you exaggerating? Come on, get real." "Well, his voice doesn't seem human, his eyes change color, and do you remember the green liquid and the black pills he had for lunch?" "What do you mean, his eyes change color?" Paul asked. "Didn't you notice? Yesterday they were green. Today they're amber-colored," I answered. "Even if his eyes change color, I still don't believe he's an alien." "But the comet explains everything. It entered the Virgo constellation last week, and Mr. Stone is a new teacher." I talked to Dana's brother, Matt. He said that this is Mr. Stone's first year at Jefferson High. "No one knows where he comes from," I said. "Maybe." Paul's eyes lit up. "Maybe that's why he asked us all those personal questions. He wants to study us." "Yes, you see, all clues indicate that he is an alien." "So, what can we do?" I asked. "We can spy on him. Maybe we can follow him to his house. We can see where he lives and what he does at home. However, we must be very careful. He doesn't seem to have emotions. He might get angry if he discovers we suspect him. We'll try to follow him tomorrow after school, okay?" said Paul. The next morning before school, I took Fred out for a walk in the park. Fred needs daily exercise, so my parents and I take turns walking the dog. The park was empty. It was dawn. A lonely bird chirped in the trees. The grass was wet with dew. There was peace all around. Suddenly I noticed something, or someone, moving behind the bushes. I got closer to see who or what it was. In the clearing, there was a man. He was looking up and his arms were raised. He bent down and touched the ground. Then he stood straight again, face and hands again directed to the sky. After about a minute, he turned around. It was Mr. Stone! Was he communicating with the universe? With his planet? Was he really an alien? I quickly walked away. Fortunately, Fred didn't bark. I took my dog home and then met Dana. We walked to school. I wanted to tell her about Mr. Stone, but I didn't. It was too difficult. Besides, I couldn't tell her about the afternoon plan because it was too dangerous for 3 people to follow the teacher. During the morning, I thought about Mr. Stone again and again. I was scared, but also excited. Chapter 4, Too Much Imagination. When the science class started, Mr. Adams walked in. "Come on, boys and girls. Today we're going to the science laboratory," he announced. "In our lab there are some white mice and some hamsters in cages. As Mr. Adams passed by their cages, they started to squeal loudly. They were very agitated. Mr. Adams laughed. "What's wrong?" he said, speaking to the animals. "I won't eat you." Then he gave us some worms. "You must cut them into little pieces. The pieces can live and move independently," he said. I looked at my worm. It was pale and slimy. I didn't want to cut it up. "Jennifer, are you afraid of cutting up your worm?" I looked up. Mr. Adams was at my desk. He smiled down at me. "Give me your knife." I thanked him and gave it to him. His arm touched mine. It tickled. An electric shock ran through me and I jumped. "What's wrong?" asked Mr. Adams. He seemed frightened. Nothing," I answered, trying to smile. He helped me cut up my worm, then walked away. No one else in class had noticed anything. I didn't know what to think. Were all my teachers weird, or was I just too imaginative? I wrote a note to Paul and told him what had happened. "Paul," I whispered. Paul turned and looked at me. I passed the note. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" "Paul, what do you have in your hand?" asked Mr. Adams. His voice made me freeze. We were in very big trouble. Nothing," said Paul. "Please listen to the lesson. If I see you again, you must give me the note." "I'm sorry," answered Paul. I was so happy that I wanted to laugh. Obviously, I didn't. When the bell rang, Mr. Adams called me to his desk. "Oh, no," I thought. He smiled. "I'm sorry I scared you. 2 years ago, I had an accident. My left arm is artificial. It's an electric prosthesis, and sometimes it can give electric shocks." He seemed a little embarrassed. I was surprised and sorry. He was so sweet. I thanked him and went to lunch. "Paul, forget what I wrote," I said, as I sat down at our usual lunch table. I told Paul and Dana about Mr. Adams's electric prosthesis. Then Dana mentioned Mr. Stone. Paul and I looked at each other, but we didn't say anything. Besides, after school, Dana had a dance club meeting in the gym, so Paul and I were free. We finished our chocolate milk and went out to recess. At the door we met Mr. Stone. His head was down. He seemed deep in thought. "Hi," Dana said to him. "Oh, hi," he said, surprised, lifting his head. His eyes were green again. "Wow, that Mr. Stone is really a mystery," Dana exclaimed. I still didn't want to tell Dana the whole story, so I changed the subject. Fortunately, the bell interrupted us. Before entering class at 1 o'clock, I took Paul aside. I quickly told him about what I had seen in the park. "Wow, I wonder what we'll see this afternoon," remarked Paul. Chapter 5. Mr. Stone. When the school day finished, Paul and I hid behind some bushes and watched the school gate. We saw many classes go home, and some teachers, but we didn't see Mr. Stone. The minutes passed. "Maybe he went home by car," I said. At that moment, through the bushes, we saw a man with black hair and very high cheekbones walk past. "It's him," I whispered. "Wait! He mustn't suspect that we are following him," Paul said. We waited 2 minutes. "Okay, we can go," I said. We followed him at a distance, and finally we saw him go into a house. It was a pretty pink 2-story building. There was a lawn in front of it and a big tree on the side. We crept up to the window and carefully looked inside. Mr. Stone put his briefcase down and opened the refrigerator. He took out another bottle of that horrible green liquid and put it on the table. Then he went upstairs. "Now what can we do?" Paul whispered. "No problem. I can climb the tree," I said. "Are you sure?" "Of course. Don't forget, I play volleyball." "Be careful." I went to the tree. It wasn't very high and it was easy to climb. From my position, I could see his room. Mr. Stone was there. "What's happening?" whispered Paul. "He's sitting in front of a mirror," I said softly. "His hands are on his head. Oh no!" What? asked Paul. The teacher was totally bald and his head was covered with disgusting brown warts. I felt sick. Suddenly I noticed my reflection in Mr. Stone's mirror, and Mr. Stone noticed it too. He brusquely turned around and stared at me. I was paralyzed with fear. My mouth fell open. I was expecting the worst. Instead, Mr. Stone didn't look angry. He actually seemed very sad. He opened the window. "You students think I'm weird. Come inside. I want to tell you something." Mr. Stone, I'm terribly sorry," I started to say. I was extremely embarrassed. "Don't worry. Since you're here, please come in." I climbed down the tree. Paul was very nervous. "Come on, Jenny. Let's go away before it's too late." "No, Paul, I'm going in." But I went towards Mr. Stone's front door, so Paul followed. The teacher opened the door and made us sit down in his living room. "Do you want something to drink?" he asked. "No, nothing, thank you," I answered. "Well, what are those warts on your head?" asked Paul, ignoring the look I gave him. "These warts are the results of a throat tumor. You see, I started smoking as a teenager, and I continued until the tumor. Chemotherapy made me lose all of my hair, and I developed these warts. You've probably noticed my voice. Unfortunately, the tumor destroyed my vocal cords. So now I speak with a voice implant. The tumor has caused very serious changes in my life. I started to suffer from depression and I still see a psychiatrist. I also moved, hoping to start a better life in a new environment. In fact, I'm from Wisconsin. You see, I'm not married and the illness has made me very lonely. People don't like illnesses. They stay away from sick people. Sick people bother them." "Mr. Stone, we really feel terrible about our behavior," I said. "Yes, we really apologize. We hope you can forgive us," added Paul. "Don't worry. In a sense, I'm glad this happened. I haven't talked like this to anyone for a long time. You see, I want to be friends with my students. That's why I asked your class so many questions. But it's very hard for me to smile or be cheerful. Try to understand if I'm strict or unpleasant." I smiled at Mr. Stone. I was very moved. "We understand," I said softly. "May I ask you a question?" said Paul. "Paul!" I exclaimed. "It's okay. Ask me anything you want," answered Mr. Stone. "What's that stuff you eat at lunch?" "Oh, did that scare you? The green liquid and the black pills are part of my treatment. They include protein and other nutritional substances." "And why, excuse my curiosity, were your eyes amber-colored yesterday?" Well, I tried some colored contact lenses. I wanted to do something different. I thought that a new look could make me feel better, but it didn't work. Mr. Stone? I began. I saw you at the park this morning. Gee, I probably appeared very strange to you with all those movements, he said. My doctor suggested early morning exercise in fresh, clean air. You really have watched me these last few days, I must say. Paul and I looked at each other. We felt rude and very silly. We were ashamed for being so inconsiderate. Well, Mr. Stone, we don't know how to thank you for your hospitality and kindness, I said. We really don't deserve it. Our behavior? That's enough. That's enough, don't worry. Thank you for your company. I'll see you tomorrow at school. And remember, if you ever want to come and visit me, you're always welcome. Thank you very much. We'll come again, said Paul. Paul and I left Mr. Stone's house and walked home. Well, I think we've learned a lesson, Paul said. We must remember that many people in this world are suffering. Many people have problems. And if they act in strange ways, there are reasons. There isn't an alien behind every bush. There's a person, just like you and me, and maybe this person needs friendship and a helping hand. I looked at Paul with affection and admiration. His words expressed my own thoughts perfectly. We had let our imagination and superficiality dominate us. This made us forget human feelings and problems. I thought about Mr. Adams and his artificial arm. Even in that case, I had overreacted with my ridiculous suspicions. Hey, Paul, I said, I want to celebrate. This adventure is over. I feel relieved. Let's go to the Rainbow and buy an ice cream. Okay, Jenny, good idea. Let's call Dana, too, I added, thinking it was the moment to inform her about everything. Sure. We stopped at Dana's house and invited her. Chapter 6. Thanks to a missing watch. We sat down at the Rainbow and ordered 3 sundaes. Dana, we have news about Mr. Stone, I said. Yes, although it's a very long story, Paul added. We told her everything. The news on the comet and the intergalactic meetings. Our plan to spy on Mr. Stone. Finally, the teacher's sad story. Dana's expression went from surprised to worried to ashamed during our tale. Our class must be much nicer to him, she said. But this comet? Maybe aliens will come to Earth. Dana, please, I don't even want to hear the word alien, I exclaimed. Let's keep our eyes open for people in need, not for aliens, Paul added. Okay, sorry, said Dana. From the window of the ice cream parlor, I noticed that it was already dark. I looked at the time. My watch wasn't on my wrist. Oh no, my watch, I exclaimed. Then I remembered. I left it in the gym. I took it off at recess to play volleyball. I must go and get it. But Jenny, I'm sure that the janitor will find it and put it in a safe place, said Paul. I don't trust him. That watch is so important to me. It was a gift from my grandfather. He's dead now, and it's the only thing I have of him. I must go to school immediately. But the school's closed now, Dana commented. No, not today. Mrs. Ching is at school all evening because she's preparing some math tests. I know because I heard her talking to Miss Smith. Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow then. I have to go home and start my homework, Paul said. Me too, Dana added. We left the Rainbow and I went towards Jefferson High. The back door was open. I went in. Our gym is on the ground floor, but I didn't go there directly. Something stopped me. I felt a strange sensation. I didn't know what it was. Something wanted me to climb the stairs and go up to the classrooms. I felt afraid. The school was dark and silent. I shivered. Where am I going? Why am I climbing these stairs? I thought.